Justin Kurzel, the Snowtown killings were perhaps the most disturbing human act in Australia's history. You've made a film about it, which is actually going to screen in Cannes very soon. But I wanted to take you back to the first moment when the idea was proposed to you that you make this film. What was your initial response to the idea?
I'd been talking to Anna at Warp Films about another project, and she said, "Oh, I've got something else you might be interested in." And I said, "Oh, well, what is it?" And she said, "Well, just wait until you've had a look at the script." And I opened up the script and it said Snowtown across the front, and I thought, oh, it couldn't be, and started reading it. And at first I had a huge trepidation about it, but I was really curious because I came from Gawler, which is about 10 minutes away from where the events happen. And just started reading this script, and it was a really fresh perspective on something that I really had no idea about. Apart from the bodies in the barrels, that's kind of where I think most people's knowledge ends with this case. And Shauna just found a really fantastic kind of point of view in this character, Jamie Vlasakis, and a really compelling way of integrating it within the community that had happened. So it was probably a number of things. It was more that I just couldn't put the events down whenever I was sort of reading it through the books or the transcripts. It just kept on being in my head, really.
And why did you think it was an important story to tell?
Because it was a contemporary Australian story, and it was probably one of our darkest chapters, and really not much had been known about it, or much debate and discussion as to why and how it happened. And I think a lot of it kind of came from the community and the situation the community was in at the time.
That one. G'day, mate.
Good morning, Dave.
I'm John. How you doing?
Sweetheart.
You alright? Pretty good. Nice to meet you. Take a seat, mate. You hungry? Yeah? I got some bacon and eggs going. Do you want that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Alright. You hungry again, mate?
Yeah.
You eat like a fucking horse, you do, don't you?
No.
You want some eggs, some bacon and everything?
Yes,
Yeah? Sausages? You want sausages too, Jamie?
Yeah.
Yep. Alright. There we go. I'll just get this up and then I'll look after you, alright? Jamie, mate, I'm really sorry if I woke you up last night too, mate. Just had to deal with that fucking pig across the road, eh?
Don't worry about it, Jamie. John will take care of that bit of shit.
Yeah. It's just not right, mate. You know what I mean? I mean, if the kids were from the fucking city, I bet they'd look after them real quick, you know what I mean? He wouldn't be out in bail in a fucking day, would he?
This is my eldest boy, Troy.
G'day, mate. I'm John. How are you? Jesus, bro, I fucking love. There he is. What do you have a big night of?
I'd assume so,
Yeah.
yes.
Wild one, is he?
To me, the film's about the power of language. It's about the dangerous proximity of rhetoric, of sort of strong words, and how close that is to action. In the sense that John Bunting was such a charismatic figure, and I think there's the scenes in the film where you show him talking to the local community and how quickly that descends into real action. Were you trying to connect the Snowtown story to broader social themes in Australia?
Well, I think that within a lot of these communities there are no voices. They don't feel as though they're being kind of listened to, and they, to me it was always like a kind of Western, this sort of still landscape that was not being connected to. And along comes this kind of preacher who offers an ideology, no matter how corrupt it is, that people believe in. And I guess there was a kind of slight cautionary tale in the film about turning a blind eye to this sort of stuff. But I guess the power and those sort of patterns of someone coming in and exploiting a kind of large group of people who are incredibly vulnerable, or countries.
There you go. You want to see you? What do you say?
Thank you.
Thank you. Good one.
boy.
There you go.
I like to hear manners now from the outfit, mate.
Yeah. Good on you. Hey? Come here. Come here. There you go. Tuck at the house. There you go, mate. Tuck at the house. Tuck at the house. Go on. Come here, come here, come here, come here. Have a look. Come on, come on.
you've set it quite deliberately against a suburban backdrop that's quite familiar probably to all Australians. There's the sound of the cricket on the radio, game shows, pokies, eating at the Chinese restaurant, etc. It's a really uncanny effect because it seems in some ways to suggest that this could be happening, that this could have happened in other parts of Australia. Why did you do it that way?
Well, because I just wanted to demystify it a little bit. Like when I read through the transcripts, some of these murders happened while they were watching television, you know, and in the suburbs while kids were playing next door. And to me, it had always been made out to be this kind of freaky horror story. And when I started reading it, there were so many familiarities within the landscape and within, you know, some of the details that I wanted to instantly connect people to. So there was just that degree of separation wasn't huge. So that's why there is a lot of kind of iconic pop culture, Australian pop culture within the film that is like, you know what, this isn't too far away from our lives. While you were watching cricket, you know, on a Sunday afternoon with a beer in your hand, this was happening, this was going on. You know, while you were watching Rex Hunt, this was going on. And I just felt there was a familiarity in the landscape. There was a kind of banality and an ordinariness that's where this brutality came out of. And I guess those sort of those little kind of sound bites throughout the film was a device to clearly give that sort of some sort of connection.
A feature film is a massive undertaking. It's a full year at minimum, most likely 2 or 3, and in some ways it's with you for the rest of your life. Did you feel trepidation living with this subject matter, knowing that you'd be living with it for so long? Yeah,
I did. I mean, I had this stupid habit of reading about it just before I went to bed and had probably the most vivid nightmares I've ever had. And you know, and then on top of that, filming in the real place and always feeling as though the events were very, very close to you with people that either knew John or were 3 houses, you know, up from where one of the murders happened. So you feel its horror is very present, but it was just, you know, it was just so compelling. It was just, you just wanted to know more, and you did want to keep on thinking about it and debating it and discussing it. I mean, it was just so much kind of meat there that needed to be sort of deciphered. So, you know, it's probably only now, after I've kind of finished with the craft side of it and been so preoccupied with that I'm now starting to have those very instant memories of what happened. And I don't think it's the sort of film that you can just clock off. I think it does live with you and stay with you. And, you know, I'm still going through that process of decoding where we went and what I imagined and the sort of brutality I faced.
Do you think a filmmaker has a moral obligation when telling a story? Do you think in this case, did you feel a moral obligation to, for example, the victims in the story, or is your obligation only to the film that you're making?
I was just very, very conscious at the beginning that the victims had to be represented with integrity and respect, but I didn't want this film to be all kind of neatly woven up at the end with some sort of moral resolution, or that we were presumptuous enough to offer these kind of definitive answers about something that is incredibly complex, that has enormous amounts of opinions about. To us, it was a film that was an observation, and it was about, you know, trying to, I guess, create an empathy for all the people involved so that there was a better understanding or a snippet of how and why this could happen. But I mean, I've never been interested in films that offer you a kind of single moral resolution, and you know, I don't think I can with this film. And you know, it needed, you know, to me the most important thing was that it was a visceral experience, and that we explored the sort of violence in the film and the darkness through the characters.
I think people will inevitably respond in a variety of different ways to this film. I'd like to get your response on some of the reactions that will inevitably emerge. For example, did you really need to show the graphic violence? You know, this is a common criticism of films about violent subject matter. Is it really necessary to show graphic violence in telling this story?
Yeah, well, you know, the violence was really crucial to Sean and I in terms of how we balanced that, and obviously some we thought needed to be suggested, and there was some that we felt was right to be explicit. But, you know, our key to it all was that it had to be shown through the journey of Jamie. You know, when it was revealed to Jamie and how it's revealed to Jamie was the most important thing to us. You know, I think you have to take with subject matter like this an audience to an edge, and you have to let them look over the abyss of the brutality and the depravity that has actually happened in this story, but at the same time make sure that they feel like they're in kind of safe hands. That is a very subjective thing. Some people will think that we went too far, some will feel as though it sits just right. But I never wanted to sanitise it, but at the same time exploit the sort of violence that's in there. But, you know, hopefully it's always connected to the emotional truth of the scene. And the violence plays a very, very important part in terms of the revealing of the story. You know, each bit of violence that happens is a kind of third character in the film that reveals more and more about John's psychology and I guess the nightmare that kind of happens, that's happening to Jamie. And the other interesting thing about the violence that I found very particular to this film was I guess how a lot of it came out of a banality and an ordinariness that, you know, as we kind of talked about before, while people were watching TV or they'd go and cook something after they'd killed someone, there was a kind of casualness about this that I found to be actually the most horrific about the case. And that was very, very important, and, you know, something that I felt you needed to show a certain amount to be able to really understand that sort of type of violence.
I think another criticism will inevitably be that I guess the film doesn't show there's no redemptive ending, and that this is an inherent kind of fault. It then becomes a question of why make this film at all if you can't find the goodness in it. Do you have a kind of response to that?
Well, I mean, to me, the resolution of darkness is not always this kind of definitive answer where everything's resolved. I think that, and with this case, there wasn't. I mean, it wasn't like this defining moment where kind of Jamie rings the police or kind of, you know, and to me, that's not what was kind of interesting about it, you know. It's similar to kind of Haneke's films, I guess, as well, where, you know, the monster or the kind of violence and kind of, I guess, why it's happening is really not the important thing. It's how the characters interact with that. And to me, that was always the most important thing in the film. To me, the redemption in the film is, I guess, the fact that the story is being told with a very, I think, very strong human element in it, and that there's a perspective in this story that is being revealed for the first time. So, but I never felt, and Sean and I never felt as though we were, you know, we would suddenly go, oh, you know, and that's why it happened, and, you know, and this is what we can learn from this. You know, it was really about allowing an audience to discover that and to think and debate that, as opposed to me kind of giving it to them on a silver platter. And in fact, I'm still thinking and discussing that and debating that in my head, and how and why this happened and what redeeming thing we can get out of this. But I think if it's honest and there's truth there, and it feels like a really, you know, authentic observation, then, you know, hopefully people can come up with their own defining resolutions about why and how it happened.
You all right?
Oh, hey, John.
Good to see you, mate.
Yeah, you too.
Max goes to lift home.
Oh, yeah?
You remember David?
Yeah, g'day, mate.
Just telling Liz. Dave got himself an apprenticeship, John.
Did he?
Yeah, mechanic.
That's good.
Well, Dave's been at the job 2 weeks now.
2 weeks. Look out. How's it been going?
It's all right. As long as he sticks with it.
Away he goes. It's a bit dirty, is it, mate? Jesus, mate, they're flash. What do you call those?
They're Nike Airs.
They must have cost a bit.
They did. First week's paying all. Why not? Splash out.
Yeah. Why not?
What do you call them?
Cheap.
The research that you did, what was the process that you went through in preparing for the film?
Yeah, there was Andrew McGarry's book that that Sean had bought, And I found another book called Killing for Pleasure by Debbie Marshall. That was a really in-depth book, in-depth search into the behind the scenes of the murders, and she went and interviewed a lot of the victims and some of the relations of the perpetrators. And it was really from her book that we got a lot of kind of insight information from, and then just reading the transcripts, which there are many of, and Jamie Vlasakis spoke quite a lot through the trial. John didn't. Our, I guess, background with John was we did a lot of interviews with people that were very close to the perpetrators or the victims, and we spoke to many people within the community who knew of them. So a lot of, I guess, the details of John, and they're an interpretation, you know, but that kind of everyman guy, and the guy who kind of cooks and goes to parent-teacher interviews and brings sort of stability and order to this family and community. A lot of that was from our kind of interviews with people that had direct contact with the perpetrators. And
did you end up filming it in the area where the events originally took place?
Yeah, we filmed right in the hub of where it took place, and, you know, as I said before, like 2 or 3 streets down from where some of the murders happened.
And I understand that the cast is entirely, except for the main character, except for Daniel Henschel, entirely consists of unprofessional actors.
Yeah, Richard Green's the only other one who plays Barry Lane, the transsexual in the film. So it's Dan and Richard, the only ones that kind of have had experience.
And why did you choose to do it this way?
Well, I just thought that, a lot of this was about the authenticity of the community. I think that if you instantly recognised on screen something that felt like felt very unique, I think you could be drawn into the story much quicker. So I instantly went, it has to be told from the inside out. And there was also something interesting in the dynamic. John came from Queensland and Nala and was an outsider into this community. So I was really interested in, there's this middle class actor from Sydney, and placing him in this environment and what sort of effect that would have in terms of him being this outside force. It was really interesting because Dan, I was wanting to get someone who wasn't known, didn't have a huge amount of baggage, and was able to kind of disappear within this community. But Dan had done a whole lot of soap that I didn't know about called Out of the Blue, which is on like constant repeat in the area from 2 to 3 in the afternoon, that all the guys knew. So he would walk around like he was a star. It was like he was Tom Cruise. So everyone kind of, it had a really interesting effect because everyone just gravitated to him. Yeah, well,
that's an interesting parallel with John Bunting, that charismatic outsider as well. Yeah.
And I just didn't. I mean, it was a fortunate, little thing, but. Dan went down there for 10 weeks, 12 weeks before we started shooting, and started to develop relationships with all the other guys, and and I was just very conscious that I just didn't want faces that people went, oh, well, that's so and so from playing a, I don't know. There's something a little bit patronising about it that I just didn't feel was right for this film.
And did working with non-professional actors present any unforeseen difficulties?
There's always the kind of there's always the challenge of how to create an environment in which they can do their best work, as opposed to me saying do it another way or give me 5 takes of this and stuff. That you really had to create have a lot of lead-in time within each scene, be able to kind of talk through where we are, get them in an emotional kind of place and state, and then really just allow them to be very present in the scene. And then the great thing about first-timers that I noticed, and it was a revelation to me, is that they listen extremely well to each other because they're not going in with any premeditated idea of how to play the scene. Whereas like Dan, when he first started it, would go, I'm going to walk into this scene and then I'm going to look her in the eye and then I'm going to look out the window and then I'm kind of going to do this. And you could see him kind of clogging whereas these guys are kind of just like completely and utterly there listening. So when I got into the edit, I had so much incredible material to use of response, of just reading people listening. And it was a really big, even Dan would like look out the window and they would kind of look out as well. I mean, they were so connected to the actual moment and the presence.
There's something really interesting that I noticed watching it the second time was that some of the actors seem to exist so comfortably in the frame, in the scene. It's really rare to see actors being able to just be in a scene and doing nothing because
Yeah.
they're constantly acting.
Yeah.
Whereas the people in the community in the Snowtown story, they're just there and it's quite naturalistic. It's really interesting.
It's this weird thing where it's not docodrama. You're not sitting there recording people being completely themselves and real, and it's not fiction. It just sits in this lovely world in between where they're aware of the lights and the camera and everything, but they're so comfortable with who they are and what they're doing, and feel the freedom to be able to riff off whatever. And the script was quite improvised. You know, I kind of call it more of a scriptment, even though there were really strong passages, especially from John's dialogue within the film. Really, it was just kind of a mapping out of the events, and then we gave the cast the freedom to be able to go, you know, I would never say that, or can we change this, or I wouldn't even tell them what's in the scene. All I would do is just very, very simply go, he comes in, he's done this is about betrayal. How have you felt about... So that they were given... You know, it was just very simple for them. They were given the freedom to be very raw and connected to kind of who they are and the experiences they've had, and then play the moment, play the beat within the scene, rather than kind of having so much shit going on in their head. Yeah,
I think it's a really terrific achievement, the way that you've captured that community. I just wondered finally whether they'd seen the final product yet, and what their response was, the people around Snowtown and the areas that were most affected by this original story, if they've seen it and how they responded.
We had a couple members from the Snowtown committee who came and saw opening night in Adelaide, who I think from the sounds of it were relieved that Snowtown had been portrayed in the way it was, that it, you know, because there's a myth about Snowtown that all the murders happened there and the people came from Snowtown and so forth. So they, you know, I think they were really encouraged that it clearly shows the geography between Snowtown and northern suburbs of Adelaide, and that so their response to it was very, you know, was positive. In terms of the community within the northern suburbs, I'm really happy to say that we've got it. The Reading Cinema in Elizabeth is picking it up, and it'll be screening it there, and it's going to be really interesting to see whether people go and engage with it and what sort of response they have. But in terms of the larger community, apart from the cast, I haven't had any direct feedback yet.
Well, I think it's a terrific film, so
Thanks,
I wish you all the best, and good luck in Cannes.
Thanks, mate.
I've had a gutful. Right while we're sitting here, some little kid's being touched up.
What do you think about that?
Don't think I should be doing that.
I don't think I should be doing that, do you? You want to go up again? Yeah. You're a natural, mate.
You think your mum's going to like these? Probably not, but who cares? Do you mind if I stay over? Of course, mate. You ever shot a gun before? Feel good? So why not do something about it?
It's your brother Barry. I thought you should know I'm on my way to Queensland. I don't know if I'm going to hitch all the way or catch the bus. Don't reckon I'll be home for a while, mate. Can you tell Mum?
You don't need to worry, all right? They're nobody, mate.